never let it grow. I'm at war with it, but it's hard to let it go. It's hard to let it go.
It's safe to say that Bungie was trying to play their cards right when it came to getting things as closely as possible to perfect in Destiny 2. What I mean is by getting both sides of the PvE and PvP scales of justice equal, because if Bungie were to cater to PvE, it will create issues in PvP and vice versa. I'll give you an example. All rocket launchers in Destiny 2 have one rocket in the magazine due to frequent access of power ammo in the Crucible. Even though power ammo is given to one person at a time, it would still be incredibly unfair for even one person to have a rocket launcher with 2 or 3 rockets in a magazine. Prime example why a perk like Tripod doesn't exist in Destiny 2. Another purposeful endeavor by Bungie was to make PvP less ability reliant so that it's more reliant on actual gun skill. This is why the speed of the time to kill and ability cooldowns have been drastically slowed down. My entire thesis directly correlates to the underwhelming exotics in this game, both weapons and armor, and how they fulfill the most bare minimum requirements to be considered exotic. I've made it perfectly clear that I understand why Destiny 2 is the way that it is, but it's just sad how the majority of the exotics in this game have perks that are either super situational or just borderline useless. I have the same mindset in Destiny 2 as I did in the previous iteration of Destiny, in the sense that I'll only use an exotic weapon or armor piece if its perks are useful the majority of the time. I'm not a fan of utilizing weapons or armor that's only useful some of the time, especially if I have to go completely out of my way to actually utilize them. I've just never been a fan of situational circumstances, and that'll never change. If you are, power to you, because I have nothing but respect for you if that's the case. I'm not really feeling a lot of the exotic armor in this game for multiple reasons. For one, there are 33 exotic armor pieces in Destiny 2, evenly spread out amongst the 3 characters in the game, with each character granted access to 11 exotic armor pieces each. Out of the 11 exotic armor pieces available for each class, 4 of these armor pieces were already present in Destiny 1. To make matters worse, each class has one exotic armor piece that is literally an exotic armor manifestation of a perk that was present on one subclass skill tree in Destiny 1. I probably lost you there, so I'll explain what I meant. The perk for the Wings of Sacred Dawn for the Warlock is literally Angel of Light from the Sunsinger skill tree, whereas the Hollow Fire Heart for the Titan is Simmering Flames from the Sunbreaker skill tree, and the Foe Tracer for the Hunter is the Keen Scout perk from the Hunter's Night Stalker skill tree. So out of the 33 exotic armor pieces that were given in Destiny 2, only 64% of them are new. That's 55% if you count the Wings of Sacred Dawn, the Hollow Fire Heart, and the Foe Tracer, which once again are mere exotic armor forms of perks that we previously could select on some of the character subclass skill trees in Destiny 1. If these 3 exotic armor pieces existed in Destiny 1, they do something similar to what exotics like the Impossible Machines and Immolation Fist did, in the sense that they grant you access to a particular perk in a subclass skill tree without the necessity of actually selecting a perk, enabling you to select another perk in that same vertical row of perks. If you pay close attention, it seems that Bungie picked some of the most underrated and underused exotic armor pieces from Destiny 1 to bring into Destiny 2. And despite the fact that I don't agree with anything from the previous game returning in the sequel, I'd rather Bungie pick what was considered to be the worst to return if anything absolutely had to return. This is definitely the safest route to take, and I can only assume that Bungie wanted to give these armor pieces a second chance since they didn't see a lot of use before. However, I do recall seeing the Lucky Raspberry and the Young Ahamkar Spine pretty frequently in Destiny 1. Their use became less frequent after the grenades that they support were nerfed. But when the Sunbracers, which were known as the Sunbreakers in Destiny 1 and had a name change for an obvious reason, were updated for the 2016 April update, these gauntlets would grant you an extra solar grenade charge and make them last longer. In Destiny 2, you don't get that second solar grenade charge, and I'm for certain that Bungie did this to maintain the quote-unquote balance that they worked so hard to incorporate into Destiny 2's PvP. You might ask why the Starfire Protocol was able to keep its original perk that grants you a second fusion grenade. That's very simple to answer. It's because fusion grenades, alongside other sticker grenades in Destiny 2, don't kill in one shot anymore, effectively making the Starfire Protocol pretty fair if you think about it. I don't agree with anything from Destiny 1 returning in Destiny 2, especially exotic weapons and armor, because the most exciting part about playing a new game is the exhilaration of obtaining new gear. I feel if Bungie absolutely had to bring back some old gear, they could have at least waited to do it in the form of a free content instead of recycling 12 exotic armor pieces, 3 perks in the form of an exotic armor, and 2 exotic weapons, all in the vanilla phase of Destiny 2. I enjoy grinding for my loot, but it's incredibly demotivating to decrypt an exotic engram when I have a 36% chance of getting a piece of armor that I already had in Destiny 1. On the topic of underrated, this only halfway applies to the exotic weapons that return, in the sense that Hardlight, which was pretty mundane weapon in Destiny 1, so to speak, and I hardly saw anybody use it, but Might of Multitool on the other hand was one of of the most popular weapons in Destiny 1 and even had its own meta in year 2 after it was reintroduced in the 2016 April update. So why Bungie decided to bring this weapon back when it already had its time to shine in Destiny 1 is completely beyond me. But speaking of exotic weapons, I've come to the realization that they're also pretty lackluster in this game as well. If we're going by cosmetics alone, I'd say that we have some of the most amazingly designed exotics that I've seen since the second year of Destiny 1. From the Portal and or Half-Life inspired tractor cannon to the Rat King, I can't really say anything bad about Destiny 2's exotic weapons by looks alone. But it's the skill trees that I have the biggest gripe with, and I can't help but notice that Bungie made a similar mistake with Destiny 2's exotic weapons that they did with the exotic weapons introduced in the year 1 era of Destiny 1. In the first year of Destiny 1, there were only a few exotic weapons that had an intrinsic perk, and from my perspective, an exotic weapon with an intrinsic perk gave it more purpose and more utility in favor of a legendary weapon. Legendary weapons had random perks in Destiny 1, and what would be considered a god roll legendary weapon would always be used in favor of an exotic weapon. This, however, is not applicable in Destiny 2, since all legendary weapons have set perk rolls, meaning that exotic weapons in Destiny 2 don't have to compete with legendary weapons as much. So with that being stated, the reason why I'm not a fan of the majority of the exotic weapons in Destiny 2 is because some of them just don't do enough. If you've noticed, the only perks on an exotic weapon that actually do something are the intrinsic perks and the trait perks. The other 3 perks aren't even actual perks with in-game effects. They exist only as brief explanations of how the weapon performs. If you watch any of Patrick Casey's exotic weapon review videos, he normally only talks about the intrinsic and the trait perks for this exact same reason. It's fair to say this because we don't have the option to swap between different perks on a lot of these exotic weapons that actually see what stats would change. For example, the Rat King has extended mag listed as his magazine perk, but how does that even make sense? I mean, we clearly see that the Rat King has a 15-round magazine, but we're still encountering the same problem that this is a brief explanation and not an actual perk. Like I said before, if the Rat King had an additional magazine perk that we had the option to swap to, it's pretty obvious that his magazine size would decrease due to losing the extra rounds from extended mag, and it probably gain a few points in another stat. However, we do have a few exotic weapons that don't follow this trend. For example, the Vigilance Wing and Hardlight both have alloy magazine, which speeds up your reload when a magazine is empty, while the Mighty Multi-Tool and Sweet Business both have high caliber rounds, so we already know how strong high caliber rounds are. This means that these weapons all effectively have 3 perks, whereas exotic weapons such as the aforementioned Rat King only have perks that exist in the form of the intrinsic perk and the trait perk. See, this right here is just lazy and pathetic. They gave all these weapons extended mag and just called it a day. Someone needs to explain to me what's extended about the Warcliffe Coils magazine when it only has 1 rocket. Whatever.